Hello and welcome to the Leadspire TechFounders series, where we're joined by the founders of some of East Anglia's most exciting tech businesses. My name's Alex Saunders, I'm a senior associate in the technology team. I'm delighted to be joined today by James and Ben from Rainbird.
I'm James Duez. I'm Chief Executive and co-founder of Rainbird Technologies.
So I'm Ben Taylor. I'm CTO and also co-founder at Rainbird.
Great, thanks so much for joining us today, guys. So I expect that a lot of people in the tech community will have heard of Rainbird, but for those who haven't, perhaps you can give us a bit of background as to what Rainbird does.
So Rainbird is a B2B enterprise software business. We have a automation platform which helps large organizations automate what would traditionally be human decision-making, the kind of complex decision-making that most businesses rely on.
So AI sort of conjures images of Skynet, Terminator, those sorts of things. Have you, since you've been going for the last 6 years, noticed a change in the attitude towards sort of AI technology?
Let's tackle the Terminator thing, because that is something which remarkably, even 6 years after we started this business, I'm still asked about when we're talking about AI. And it's really about media perceptions. I think a lot of the hype and noise in the way the AI market has evolved, and is still actually quite overhyped, has come from media perceptions. There's a really great example. There was an experiment that was run at Facebook between two bots just recently, and the Daily Mail, you can always trust the Daily Mail to come good with a headline for this, had a headline which was something like "Robo-Stop. Facebook turn off their experiment when two bots start talking in their own language that only they can understand." Then it went on to say something along the lines of this closely resembling the plot of the film Terminator, where robots come and take over humanity. And of course, this is very scaremongering, very scary if you don't know anything about this field and you actually believe what you read. When you actually go and look at what that experiment was doing, it was two bots that were being asked to learn how to negotiate over a pool of resources, in this case a set of balls. And the language that they'd been given didn't have the ability for them to count, so they evolved the ability to count. And it just became this kind of nonsense string of words between these two different bots. Facebook turned it off because it wasn't an interesting experiment. They didn't turn it off because anything scary was happening. But what that illustrates is this problem of this media explosion of hype and interest, because it's sci-fi and it's exciting and it writes good headlines, which is really hampering those of us who are trying to focus on what's really possible with these technologies today.
I think it's also worth remembering that AI is a very broad label for a whole stack of different technologies. And this is not the first time AI has been talked about. You know, AI was all the rage in the 1950s, and then there was a resurgence of AI again in the late 80s and early 90s. So it's been used as a very broad brush term to describe, you know, typically computers doing things that we thought were intrinsically required of humans. AI almost describes the things that, you know, don't quite work. Once a computer can do a task that we thought was intrinsically human, it ceases to meet that definition of AI and just becomes mainstream computer science.
I'm sure there have been a number of high points. Is there any that immediately spring to mind?
Overcoming the inertia with a startup is always very difficult. So, you know, you climb lots of mountains on the way, and then you realize you've got a bigger one ahead of you. I think the business getting into Techstars, which is one of the most well-respected accelerator programs globally, was definitely a high point. I think graduating what essentially was a 13-week boot camp, where we tried to get 2 years growth, that was a very challenging process, but one that was ultimately very rewarding. You know, the first client win, the first partnership, you know, these are all definitely high points. But I think most of the high points for me have been around team. It's just, you know, when we get together either for a town hall, all hands meeting, or we get together at Christmas, when we bring the whole business together, the London office, the Norwich office, and you see what you've built manifest in the people that you have in front of you, I find that is always gives me a real buzz.
I'm sure that there'll be budding entrepreneurs potentially watching this and thinking, well, every early stage growth company needs investment, needs funding. What's your approach to that process been? Have you kind of gone out to angel investors? Have you gone to institutional investors? What's your approach to that?
You know, the traditional model has been you do an angel round, you may, you know, as a sort of a seed round, you may then go do another round, and then you might go and do a traditional Series A or Series B and go to institutions. The path that Rainbird's taken has been a bit different to that. We've actually raised much more in angel money or what we might call informal investment from high net worth individuals. Some funds for sure, but I think 90% of our shareholding has been in the hands of individuals. But it's the person that people invest in. It's the business idea is great, but it's really the individual, because everything's going to change, stuff's going to go wrong, and you're looking at that. You know, investors are looking at the individual and saying, are you going to be able to adapt and pivot? You know, as you hit your challenges. And I have seen investors say, I'll absolutely invest in you, but what was your second best idea? Because it's the person that makes the difference. And so team's been really important. That's not just us, that's the people we've surrounded ourselves with.
If you to go back, do it all again, would there be anything that you'd do differently? Is there anything that you've sort of learned and you could pass on to budding entrepreneurs through this process?
There are lots of things that, you know, you do differently with the benefit of hindsight. I think, you know, even if you know it's the wrong thing to do, it's very easy to fall into not properly getting out of the building and testing your hypotheses. People, you know, founders know they should go out and ask for feedback. They'll go out to their friends, they'll go out to their family, of course, who will always say nice things. You have to actually get out there and do the uncomfortable thing of properly testing your ideas. So a lot of the activities that people will busy themselves with about building a company, you don't need to do until you know whether you have something that's real. Getting out there, testing those hypotheses, getting blunt feedback, and not working on your own the assumption that your hypothesis is correct. That's really hard to do. And I mean, I don't know what you say, but I would say that's the most important, one of the most important things.
I'd go a little bit further. I think that is the most important thing. It's also the hardest thing to do. I think it goes even further. You have to be absolutely willing to let go of your ideas and pivot and change, and don't cling on to things that aren't working.
I know that you operate worldwide, but also have sort of remained fairly active within the sort of Norwich, Norfolk tech scene. Is that something you're keen to continue to do, particularly around sort of Sync the City and your involvement in that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're both big ambassadors for the Norwich tech scene and for what Norwich has become. It's always difficult to balance, you know, what you can give that community and the obligation you have to your shareholders and staff in driving your own business, and we have to find our own level in that. But Norwich is a great place to run a business. I think it's also, though, important that Norwich as a whole, for all of its great attributes, remembers that it needs to calibrate itself on a national and international scale. And I think, you know, we talk about Norwich the Norwich tech scene is not like the London tech scene, and there are big differences, not just the scale actually, but the pace is very different. But that needn't be a barrier. You know, I think it's quicker to drive from Norwich to London than it is to cross San Francisco Bay. So we ought not let geography be the thing that's in the way.
And it is the case that there is some fantastic tech talent in Norwich. So we're able to build really good, very strong, very capable tech teams out of Norwich, both in Rainbird and in lots of the other businesses that spring up. There's a reason why there's a good tech scene here, and the talent is a big part of driving that.
Fantastic. Well, thank you ever so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure, and hopefully catch up with you both soon.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alex.